I don't know if you can hear, but there's thunder in the background, and but it never fails whenever I come visit my grandmother. The sun always comes out right on top of me at that. Every time I come here. You're watching over me. Oh, it's a glorious feeling. I love you, Mama. Hey you all, and welcome back to my channel. I hope everybody's having a beautiful weekend. If you are new to my channel and you don't know who I am, I post a lot of videos to just inspire others how to get through with their traumas, their childhood issues, their healing processes, and any type of advice that I may have to give. And with this specific video, I will be talking about a part 2 to the part 1 of my spiritual journey and where I'm at today and what it took for me to get to this point. Now, if you haven't watched part 1, go ahead and link back to that. I just go a little bit in depth about the difference between religion and spirituality and what it means to me, and what my belief systems were about God and the Bible and the universe and how I feel like it's all connected. You know, whatever I didn't touch base on within that video, I will probably talk about in this video. I will go ahead and add that there might be a couple of videos from a different time, not really in relation to what this video is about, but who I am today kind of links back to a specific event in my life in regards to a person, and that's kind of where we're going to go from that. So just to fill you all in, I'm Starla, and this is my truth, and this is my spiritual journey, and I'm glad that you all are joining in with me. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I had a grandmother who was very significant in my life. Probably, bless you. I feel like she was probably the more dominant role model in my life. I didn't have really too many like adults that I really looked up to as a child, but my grandmother, I looked at her like she was a single mom. Oh, hold on. Oh, battery's dying. I had to fix that. Okay, sorry. So I looked at her like she was everything. I mean, I didn't have really much guidance and supervision growing up in a healthy way. So my grandmother, she raised 7 kids, from what I understand, solo for the most part. So anyways, my grandmother was a huge influence on my life. I think I depended a lot on about what my facade looked like to her, because she was kind of the heart of the family. I mean, she wasn't kind of, she was the heart of the family, and she was the messenger, the communicator, the one who pretty much related all of the information that was going on within the family and external to the family. Like, she was the queen bee. And unfortunately, grandparents are going to get to a certain age to where they either get sick or circumstances happen and they end up passing away. Well, I believe I was 16 or 17 whenever she got pneumonia around the holidays, and my grandmother was on an oxygen tank, a breathing machine, for a really long time, but there was just one year she got really sick and she ended up going to the hospital, and I remember being at work. I was working at a bowling alley, and I remember everybody kept telling me that I needed to go to the hospital and visit her. And I think more than anything, I was scared. I was scared of seeing her in that state, for one. And I in the back of my mind, I was like, she'll get better. You know, like, she'll get better. It's the holidays. I don't want to go in there and see her like that. You know, like, she'll get better. But she didn't get better. And they ended up pulling her life support while I was en route to finally go and see her. I got home from work and I was like, Dad, come on, let's go ahead and go. I just want to go ahead and see her. You know, I was told she don't have much time left. And by the time we got to the hospital, it was already too late. So I didn't get to see her. And I felt really guilty for a really long time. I felt like I failed her. I felt like that she had deserved more from me. Because, like, in that last probably year or so is whenever I started, you know, rebelling and hanging out with the wrong people. And my grandmother just wanted to spend time with me. She wanted me to come over on the weekends, and I always had an excuse that I didn't want to go over there. You know, I think I just got to a point where I was growing up, and I didn't really feel like I wanted to, like, hang out with my grandparent. And she was the only one that I ever knew. The only other grandparent that I ever knew was my dad's mom, but she passed away whenever I was super young, so I didn't really have a relationship with her like I did my mom's mom. So she passed away. It was really hard on me. I didn't really know how to accept it. You know, I just remember going to the funeral and going to her home afterwards. Now, her son, my uncle, the baby of the family, I believe he was the, there's a term for it, but I can't really think of it, where they're in control of, like, everything in regards to the family, you know, when they pass away, or, like, their assets, and that's who he was. He was in charge of, like, you know, her funeral, her will, her belongings, her house, all of that. There's a term for it, can't think of it. But my grandmother had a cookie jar, which I still have, by the way. Okay? Yes. I love this thing. Except it doesn't it doesn't hold the same to it that it did when she had it. Now, I asked for this when she was alive because whatever cookies she put in it made them really soft and chewy, okay? And my grandmother had a lot of Avon, you know, items too. Like, it might have been Avon, Mary Kay. She also had a lot of flower seeds. Like, so when everybody gathered up at her house, I kind of walked through and just started gathering stuff, like small stuff, like nothing that really meant anything, you know, that wasn't worth anything to, like, sell, you know. Like, I went in there and I remember grabbing this cookie jar and I'm like, you know, this is mine. And my uncle was like, no, you put that back. Like, you know, we've got to go through. And I was like, no, we ain't doing this. My grandmother said that I could have this when she passed away. This is mine. And there was no question about it after that. He was just like, okay, like, it's a cookie jar. And I'm like, but it's special, you know, like, my cookies have never been soft and chewy like they was when she had it. So I don't know what made them like that. Maybe it was just, you know, grandma's cookies. But then, like, I went through her, like, bedroom, and I went through her little containers that she had on her dresser, and I got a whole bunch of, like, Avon lipsticks and grabbed a couple of her perfumes, which I still have, and some, like, little body washes, you know, the ones that I believe I really want to say that these were Mary Kay. I don't know. She had a mixture of both. But they're the ones that had, like, the little hook, you know, that bottles look like a hook so you could hook it up to the shower hook. Yeah, like, I grabbed a couple of those, and I went in her back room of her kitchen where she kept, like, all of her cans and canisters and stuff, and I grabbed some, like, flower seeds, which I still have too, and I don't know if those are still good. Anybody who knows anything about gardening, let me know, like, how old are flower seeds? Can I still, like, I think I checked and they had an expiration date on them, but I feel like they're expired, but, like, I guess it wouldn't hurt to just try to plant them. So that's, like, been my ultimate goal for a really long time, is to have my own garden, which I haven't really had an opportunity to do because everywhere I've lived hasn't had, like, the space to make one. And I just remember, like, that's what she was all about. She liked her flowers and her garden and her stones and big rocks that she had in her garden. Like, that was her thing. And she used to sit out on the back porch and, you know, just marinate in her backyard, like all that she had worked for. And I admired that so much. So it was really hard for me to cope with at the fact of, like, I couldn't call her no more. You know, at the time I had a cell phone that was in her name and she was paying the bill. I was supposed to pay the bill, but she paid it. I got in trouble with it a lot because my dad didn't want me to have it, but my grandma was pretty much straightforward. She's like, look here, it's in my name. I pay the bill. Your dad can't take that phone away from you. And the one time that he did, he gave it to my grandma, and my grandma snuck it back to me and was like, don't let him know that you have it. And I'm like, okay. So, like, I hid it from my dad for a really long time. He never knew I had it, but, you know. So it's like, you know, it's like the little small things that I had to accept and understand that she was gone. And my whole world fumbled, you know. I feel like that's when I started to lose my existence. You know, I had barely graduated and passed high school, and then whenever I did, you know, I met a man who physically abused me, and then I got pregnant with my son, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And what sucked was, during that time, like, my mom used to emotionally abuse me a lot. You know, she was a very strong alcoholic in my late teenage years, and when I got pregnant, you know, my early 20s, she drank a lot. And there'd be times where she would say stuff like, you know, your grandmother's rolling it over in her grave because of how you're acting. And I would sit there and think about, like, I wasn't really doing anything, like, really bad, you know. So it hurt me and upset me to think that, like, I'm trying to do my best because I know my grandmother's watching. So if my mom is sitting here telling me that my grandmother would be upset with me, it really put me, like, in a really low place, because my grandmother was the number one person I never wanted to disappoint. I mean, we used to sit around and talk about my future. And did my future go as planned as I wanted it to? No, it didn't, you know, but I knew that deep down inside my heart was still where, you know, it should be. And I always, like, followed my heart, which got me caught up in some really messed up situations in life. And there's nothing I can really do to take that back. You know, it's just, they're all learning lessons. I say this all the time. So when my mom used to tell me stuff like that, you know, and like the spunky rebellion teenager that I was, or, like, you know, young lady that I was, like I said, it was my early 20s. I mean, my mom's kind of always harassed me when it comes to, like, what type of woman I am. And, you know, she's thrown up my grandmother, what my grandmother would think, a lot. And so when my mom would say these things, she would more than likely be intoxicated. So, you know, my first impression would be like, you know what? No, she'd be upset with you on how you're acting. You're my mom, and this is how you're treating me. Like, you know, when you're a mother, you know, you're not supposed to belittle your children and envy them and be jealous of their successions. You know, you're supposed to, you know, boost their confidence and encourage them and be their support. And she was really none of those things, you know, not even to this day. So it offended me and hurt me to know that I was doing the best that I could, and, like, it was constant. Like, I always felt like I was disappointing somebody, more than likely, you know, and my grandma being one of them. So it's like I kept pushing to try to prove myself to everybody. And there was a lot of times, like, I didn't pray to God. I prayed to my grandmother, you know, just to guide me and lead me and protect me and to help me and to get me through whatever situations I was getting through. Like, I talked to her heavily, like, I still do, you know. And I think I probably reached out for her more than I did God himself. And so it's like a part of me believed and knew that she was in the presence of, like, around me spiritually, and that I couldn't see her. And I think that's what hurt me the most, is, like, I couldn't get that closure from her in order to feel better. It's like sometimes, and it's crazy because, so, like, if I was upset or going through a situation in my life, I would, like, be like for real breaking down, going through it. And I would pray out to my grandmother, and I would ask her to just help me and to wrap me up in her arms and stuff. And then like after a brief moment, like I would start to calm down, and and I would just sit there for a second, and it's almost like and it's crazy because it's like I almost would feel her wiping my tears away, or putting her arm, like her hand around me or on me, to like comfort me. Like I felt that energy around me, but I was so lost in life, I never really knew what it was. Like, could never explain it. And, there was a part of me that always knew that she was there, but nobody would believe me whenever I told them. So, nor did, like, she really make it known except for in those moments. I don't really feel like I felt her unless it was whenever I was in dire need of some type of emotional support, and, she was there, I felt her. So, it didn't really all make sense to me until I started working down at the Courier Journal, which is, they go by Gannett. And I met this woman, and she's actually one of my Facebook friends. And she has a beautiful gift. And up until this moment, I had never met anybody like this before. I had read stories and watched videos and heard about people having gifts and talking to angels and talking to ghosts and spirits and all of that. But had I ever actually met one in person? No. So, before I start on that, during the whole process of when my grandmother died and I had the cookie jar, and I ended up moving out of my dad's and moving to my mom's, and then I moved here and there because my mom kept kicking me out. I lost the cookie jar. Okay, couldn't find it. Tore up about it. I was missing it for 7 or 8 years. I feel like it was about that long. Because I didn't know at what point that I had lost it. I didn't know if I had lost it in the process of moving to my mom's from my dad's, or if I had lost it moving from my mom's to my first, son's father. Like, I didn't know. So, I met this woman while I was working at the Courier Journal, and, and she had sort of been... I was overhearing conversations where she was saying that, like, she could speak to spirits, and I was just, like, intrigued. I was interested, I was more curious than anything, because she said that she's seen spirits around people that we worked with. I think somebody had just passed away or something like that, and she had brought up the fact of, like, that she could see this person's loved one around them, and I was like, I wonder if, she can see Mama. I was just so curious. So, we got in the topic, got in the conversation of it. At the time I was a smoker, so we walked outside and we were having our little smoke break. And I was like, I'm interested to know, like, what, can you communicate with my, my ancestors, for me? And she was saying that she, like, had to be in, like, a certain type of mentality, and that, when she's been drinking, under the influence, they were really strong, and she could, but so she was just, like, going all in depth about it. Well, in the midst of this conversation, I did not even say anything. I just said if she could see who was around me. And she said, she said something like, did you lose a grandmother? Or do you have a grandmother that passed over? And I was like, yes, I do. And she was like, is she a little old lady? And she started describing her to a T, like almost like when my grandma was, like, in her earlier years, not so much when she passed away. And I've heard from, people I've met along this journey that when people pass over, they don't pass over at the age that they are whenever they pass away. They end up passing over and they're at a age of, like, youth. So when she started explaining my grandmother, like, she explained her to the T, and I was like, I tell you what, I started getting chills. I started crying because I'm just like, alright, sorry. So, as she's telling me this, I started getting chills, I started getting upset, I started getting crying, I was crying. I was a hot mess on this little 15-minute break. And she starts to explain to me that you know, she's like, you know, your grandmother just wants you to know that you're doing fine. She's proud of you. She wants you to know that she just wants you and your brothers, or no, she's like, she just wants you and your family to be happy and to not worry about her. She's okay. She made it, is what she was saying. And then she said something about a pearl necklace, and she was like, you know, your grandmother said that your mom, so no, she said, ask your mom about a pearl necklace that belong, or something about a pearl necklace. And I was like, okay. Well, then she mentions my oldest son, and she was like, she also mentioned something about you got a thing for your son's feet. And at the time, like, it was like confirmation after confirmation. Like, that's how, like, I knew. I didn't know this woman. We didn't know each other. We didn't have no contacts. We didn't have no mutual friends. None of this. But I had like a thing, like a comfort, like it was an anxiety thing. Like, I rubbed my oldest son's feet all the time. I've always had a thing for baby feet. And at the time, I think my son might have been like 3 or 4. I don't know. He was about that age. And so she was like, you know, she's like, yeah, she said there's something about, like, you got a thing for, like, your kid's feet or something. And she was like, your grandmother wants you to know that you're weird. And I was like, okay. And then she's like, you know, she also wants you to know that your son's very special. And I was like, I know he's special. She's like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, he's very special. And I was like, I know that. She said, no, Starla, she wants you to understand that something is very like special spiritually about him. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and she wants you to pay attention to that. And I was like, okay. Well, then she mentioned about how the cookie jar. I was like, she's like, do you have any questions for her? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I couldn't even think of, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what do I ask? I don't know. Like, my grandmother's, like, the thought of my grandmother standing right next to me was like mind-blowing to me, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't see her, I can't feel her, like, she's here, oh my gosh. Like, to be able to see that from the other perspective, from her end, you know, I can only imagine, like, how wild that is. So, like, I'm like, ask her about the cookie jar. Like, I lost her cookie jar, I'm so sorry, but can you please ask her where this cookie jar might be? And she said to ask a female relative. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting here thinking, because I've done lived with a couple aunts, you know, I've done lived with, you know, a cousin. Like, I didn't even know who to ask. So I'm just like, okay, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. Well, then, you know, she's like, she also wants you to know that whenever you're upset and you're going through it, that she puts her hand on top of your hand to calm you down. And I was like, I knew it. Like, I knew I felt her. I'm not fucking crazy, you know? Like, I was just, at that moment, I understood and I knew that the afterlife existed. And I'm speaking about this because if nobody or you have not experienced something like this, then it's hard for you to believe. And that's not for me to say that you're not allowed to believe whatever you want to believe. This is what made me become a believer, because I knew that all the facts that she was saying is not something that she just came up on the top of her head. These are things that she actually was being told by the spirit of my grandmother. You know, so it's like, I think at the time I was going through like a rocky time with my relationship, and nobody liked my boyfriend at the time. So, you know, I kept asking, she was like, do you got anything else? Like, I think I was pestering her, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I have so many questions. Like, I just want to know this and I want to know that. And she was like, she's not here right now. You know, like, she's already like, or at the time she was like, she said she's got to go and that she loves you. And I was just like, okay, like, I felt like she was being ripped away from me again. Like, that's how I felt. Even though I couldn't see her and I didn't feel her at that moment, it's like I felt like that she was just being taken away from me. But, you know, I don't know how the afterlife works like that. So, you know, it made me a soul believer, and it made me push harder in trying to fulfill my passions and fulfill my dreams. And I think it was after that moment when I started to write about my life. You know, I think it gave me like a push, a drive. You know, I was just like, okay, you know, like I wanted to like really know that I was like wanted her to know that I was trying to be the best mom I could be, you know, like just going through it, you know, like I also was in a relationship where like I was really in love with somebody who wasn't giving me the same in return. Part of me always knew that like we were meant to meet and we were meant to like be in each other's lives for a specific reason. You know, I kept in contact with her because like I almost it's like I reached out to her whenever I needed some type of like spiritual guidance, because at the time she was the only person I knew aside from like, you know, Christians or, you know, believers in, you know, the Holy Trinity. Like that was the only people I really knew. So I had not met anybody before that had a spiritual gift. It was amazing to meet her, and if she watches this video sometime or another, just know that I'm so grateful and thankful to have met you, because you were placed in my life for a reason, and for that I am so grateful. Okay, so now that I have gotten to the point of what really catapulted me to become an even bigger believer, I had no idea what was laying in store for me. So, like I said, I continued to push harder, continued to strive harder, but I kept getting met across these like obstacles. Like it was one thing after another, one thing after another. And now that where I'm standing today, you know, a lot has like rewinded in my mind in order for me to see things in a different light and how they happened. And, you know, I strongly believe that, you know, obstacles are placed in your life in order for you to like, what's the term I'm looking for? To reevaluate, reassess, to readjust how you react to those situations, you know, depending on what the obstacle is. Okay, so during this whole transition of me believing that the angels exist, you know, I went and met my mom on a break one day. You know, like she worked, or she didn't work, but she lived kind of in the neighborhood, but not really. You know, I took a lunch break and I went ahead and visited her, because at the time I was smoking cigarettes and I was broke, so I went to go borrow some cigarettes from her. And she actually packed and made her own cigarettes, so I already knew she had them. So I went and visited her for a second, you know, and I'm chilling. I'm so excited. She's the first person I wanted to tell about this, like first person, you know. And I get to the point where I'm like, Mom, do you own a pearl necklace? And she's like, well, yes, I own a pearl necklace. And I'm like, where did you get it from? And to be honest, I don't really remember how that conversation went. You know, I do remember her saying that she had one. I was like, oh, okay. And so I started to explain to her about this woman I met and about how, you know, I felt Mama and how she's seen Mama. And I'm going all into details. And, you know, I'm super pumped. Like, I'm just like ecstatic over this. And my mom was so like nonchalant. She's like, the whole time I'm telling her, she's just like, your grandmother comes to me, you know, your grandmother comes to me a lot too. Yeah, she does. I just seen her. And I'm just like, I know, like, it's just amazing, isn't it? I'm like, you know, like, I wish I could see her. And, you know, so like, it's like, I didn't get like met with the same type of excitement from her. Like, I don't know. And then I started to ask her about the cookie jar, and she didn't know anything about no cookie jar. And I'm just like, okay. So then like I started knocking off my list on who else I needed to ask. Nobody had it. Nobody had seen it. It was just missing. So I was just kind of bummed about that. And I'm like, well, I guess, you know, it wasn't what it was all cut up to be. You know, I don't really know what that meant, but hopefully maybe one day I'll find it. I just considered it a loss in my life. You know, I was kind of bummed that it was special to me and it was special, you know, in relation to my grandmother, and I didn't have it no more. So, you know, just to fast forward a little bit, it ended up being like 3 or 4 years later, and my mom has a storage. She's always been a really big hoarder. My mom has lived from here and there and everywhere, but she continues to have a storage where she literally has like a whole living base in there, you know, from couch and dressers and clothes and whatever it is you need. I will never forget the day my mom called me and said, hey, you want to come over for dinner? You know where she was living at for the night? Her storage. I went over there. She done had pork chops frying on a flat skillet, on one of the plug-in ones, you know. She had corn on the cob, boiling in a coffee pot, and then I think she even she had something else. Green beans? I don't know what it was. She had a whole meal, and I was like, I don't know how I feel. I'm okay. Thanks though, Mom. You know, I mean, look. Me and my mom aren't always on the same page, but I do tell you this much. She has some hella survival skills, and I thank her if any of that has been passed on to me. So, you know, so we're having, I think it was like nearly Christmas time or something, and my mom and my dad were over, and she comes over one day, and my mom had a way of every Christmas she would go and get things out of her storage, like stuff from childhood, like stuff we had never seen in so many years, and she would just be like, here, Merry Christmas. My mom ain't never really been financially stable, you know, so it's like she would like grab stuff from our childhood and like, boom, here you go. Like, I think one year she gave me a folder from my music class from 5th grade that had like all of my notes and like flute music, you know, like playlists in there and stuff, and I was like, because I played flute in 5th grade, so like she had that in there, and then she gave that to me. And then one year she gave me a Lisa Frank Kitty Velcro binder. Oh my gosh, anybody who is at least 30 years and up, okay, I know y'all remember Lisa Frank. They had the plastic Velcro binders. I was too poor to have a 5-star binder, which is funny because my son asked me if he could have a 5-star binder for school, and I was like, hell no. I didn't have no $20 binder whenever I was in school. No, you ain't. No, it wasn't a binder, it was a notebook. He's like, Mom, can I get 5-star notebook? And I'm like, oh no. Like, what do you need a 5-star notebook for? And he's like, because it's cool and it's cuddle. And I'm like, Look, the only thing that's more fancier about those is because they've got inlet, you know, the little folder things that separates subjects and stuff, and you know, and they've got a hard exterior cover, and I'm like, no, you can stick with the 99-cent dollar notebooks, or what are they, like 20 cents? I don't know nowadays. Like, we haven't bought school supplies in, gosh, a few years, and he actually went to the store and got what he needed this year. So anyways, you know, and it was funny, so like she gives me this Lisa Frank Velcro binder, which I believe I still have in a tote. Because I'm kind of lightweight bad about that too. Now, I don't have a whole storage unit, but I do have a tote. Like a 4-foot tote of like stuff that my kids have had throughout the years. You know, I like to collect things that have some type of remembrance to them. It's really hard for me to part with those type of things, but like I'll keep like their first little couple outfits, or I've got a whole tote full of like letters and just a lot of random stuff, but only in a tote, not in a storage unit. So anyways, I'm off subject. She used to always give us stuff from our childhood or something that we just hadn't seen in a really long time for Christmas. Why did this woman walk up in my apartment one year and hand me this cookie jar for Christmas? I tell you what. I was so emotional. Like, I bawled like I had lost my little hamster, and I have never owned one, okay? I was like, you've had it all this time? And she was like, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, it was in my storage unit. And I'm like, motherfucker, like, I've been beating myself up for all these years about that damn cookie jar, and you've had it. So it was funny, but it was so relieving to know, and I've had it ever since. And it's funny because like I really clean it out, so it's always got crumbs from the last cookies, and like my son's father is always saying something about it, about how I've never cleaned it out, and he was like, dude, how long have those cookies been in there? And I'm like, They're still not soft and chewy though, like they was when my grandma had it. So, anyways. So, fast forward to where we were at, okay? All right. So, told my mom about this woman that I met with this gift. She didn't seem too phased. I don't know if I might have told my sister at the time, you know. And I think my sister was like, I want to meet her. I want to know, you know, like, I want to know what. It was kind of brief. Like, it didn't, the joy of it didn't last very long. And then reality went back to normal. So, it was like some years had passed. And I ended up. Now, each time something happened in my home where there was, like, you know, arguments or disagreements or, you know, any type of just uncomfortable situations, I would find random handprints in my home, okay? First, it started out to be a handprint that was on my bedroom wall that looked like somebody had came in with oily hands or like a mechanic's hands and stuck their hand on my wall. Now, it's possible that it was either my father's or my boyfriend's at the time. It's possible, just because, I mean, we had just moved in my apartment at that time when I found that one. So I'm like, well, maybe that's just from where we were moving in, and that's just, but I had never noticed it before. So that was where I was kind of like, Then it led into when my mom was staying with me, I found handprints on my bathroom mirror a lot. There was always two different sizes. There was one that kind of looked funny, and then there was a big one that was like to the side of it. And some of them, sometimes they looked like they was like going down my mirror. Like, I would get out of the shower, you all, and there would be handprints going down my mirror, okay? And then when it got down to where I wanted to clean and organize my son's room because he had new furniture, I ended up taking everything out, and I washed everything from ceiling to floor, and you know, washed the walls and everything. And I noticed he had about 3 or 4 handprints on his room, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, so, like, you know, at first when I started seeing all these handprints, I started kind of getting freaked out because I'm like, what is that? Like, something is here. Never really felt that sense of like something to be scared of. Like I said, this has been somewhere where I have lived the longest. And, you know, to me, this is home. It's my comfort zone. Like, I've made it home, and the thought of actually leaving is kind of actually saddening, you know? So, I mean, it is what it is. But, so I shoved it to the back of my mind, didn't even think nothing about it, you know, didn't even care the fact that there was handprints laying all over my apartment. Hey, you know, mi casa, su casa. For a while, I honestly thought maybe it was my ex messing with me every time he came over. And, because I remember the first time I saw the handprints, you know, we were together, and I remember showing him and saying something to him. You know, what's crazy is my mom was in the kitchen, so I kind of accused her. I'm like, what did you do? You try to scare me? You putting handprints in the mirror to try to scare me? And she was just like, she never even went in the bathroom when it happened. And whenever I said something to her, she was like, that's because God wants you to change your ways. You need to stop acting like the way you're acting. And at the time, I'm just like, I don't even know what she was talking about. Because any of these could be possible, okay? Because I don't know. But I do know that they were occurring also whenever nobody else lived here. So, you know, I knew that something was around. I didn't know exactly what or who or why. So, just keep that in mind. I was pulled in a direction a couple months ago to look up my family history. Now, I felt like there was like something within my family bloodline that I really needed to look into. And I was curious because there's only certain parts of my family that have been discussed or talked about. And when I went and had lunch with my grandmother about a month ago, well, it was the second week of July because it was right after her birthday. I actually recorded a video, and you'll see it. And upon exploring that, I realized that every time tension would come in my life, or there was frustrations or fights or arguments, is when I realized I started seeing these handprints. So I'm just like, okay, something's around me. I know there is. And then that's whenever I started to go through that deep depression, and I started feeling, you know, that the world was just never going to be the same, you know, like, been really pulling on my heart lately
to really reach out to her spiritually, because I miss her. And family just isn't the same anymore. Like, I don't know, I'm trying my hardest to raise my kids the best that I can, and like dedicate all that I have within my little home and family. And as a little girl, I never would have imagined that I would have been doing this without her here. I can sit and think on multiple occasions how often me and my grandmother used to sit in the living room and talk about my future and what type of job I'd have and what type of husband I would have. And at the time, I used to draw like 3D pictures of houses and stuff, and I used to always like designate a room just for her. And she used to say stuff like, well, how would I know if your husband would give me my medicine, or how do I know if he would like give me the right dosage? And like we'd just joke and cut up about like her having like one of those chairs that go up and down staircases. She was just the most amazing person ever. And I miss her dearly, and I know she hears me making this. Today's been a really good day, and I wanted to make sure that I had the time and make the time to come and just dedicate some time to her for a minute. I feel like I'm missing such a huge part of me, her not being here in my life. And all I do is just know that I'm trying so hard to make her happy. Like, I want her to look down on me and know that I'm trying.
And before I left, I actually heard a voice, okay? It sounded like this. Tell her I miss her and I love her before I go. And I was like, what was that? And I'm looking around. I'm like, there ain't no speakers or intercoms around here. Like,
so what's significant about my grandmother's resting place is her and her son and her daughter are all buried by this tree that entwines, kind of like, you know, stuck together. There's my Uncle Lonnie, who I never got a chance to meet because, if I remember correctly, he passed away when he was 17 in a car accident. And then there's my lovely grandmother, Beulah Faye Watson. Had to refresh her. The flowers that I actually thought were over here that somebody brought were the ones that I brought last time, and they're silk flowers, so I placed them over there on my uncle's and gave my grandmother some fresh ones. And then my Aunt Brenda, who's right there, who has a conjoining headstone with my uncle who has not passed away. And I went ahead and gave each headstone a rose because the floral bouquet came with 3, but she's got some silk flowers as well. So I don't know if you can hear, but there's thunder in the background, and but it never fails whenever I come visit my grandmother. The sun always comes out right on top of me at that. Oh, it's a glorious feeling. I love you, Mama.
To me, when it all boiled down to it, when I got home and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, it sounded like somebody was saying it inside something. But I didn't really like look too further into it until I started to think about my family bloodline again. And I started thinking about my grandfather, and I was like, you know what? Like, I never met my grandfather. My grandfather passed away on my mom's side. My grandma, I was there with my grandma. I was like, we never really heard too many stories about him. We don't really know why my grandmother and him divorced, or why, you know, like what happened. And so like, I'm on my way to go see my sister after this, you know, after this happened, and I was explaining to her what I heard and what I told, and I was like, I feel deep in my heart that that was my grandpa that was sitting. My grandpa was actually sitting with me, you know, and he told me this, and I was like, the first thought that came to my head was, they're in two different ethereal worlds, and I wanted to figure out why, because I was like, the sudden emotion of my grandma or my grandfather came over me, and I was just like, my grandfather loved my grandmother very much, and I felt it. I was bawling my eyes out on my way to my sister's, and I'm like, I can't believe I was sitting there with my grandfather this whole time. Like, has my grandfather been like protecting me all this time? Like, I've never even really even thought about him. And so I actually looked into like, whenever I had to get paternity test for my children, and they came back, I noticed that I only have one X chromosome, and I was like, that's weird, like, you know. So I started to look up what that possibly meant, and there was like disorders and diseases, but I don't have none of those, so it didn't make no sense as to why I only had one chromosome. Well, when I started to look further into it, it stated that normally people who have one chromosome means that they are more linked to their grandfather's bloodline. So I was like, well, that's weird, because, you know, like, I'm really heavily attached to my grandmother, like, who passed away, but I've never even really thought about my grandfather, you know. Never even crossed my mind until I heard this day, and started talking to my sister about it. And my mom called me one day, and I just, without even telling her, I didn't even want to tell her, without even telling her, like, what had happened, I asked her, like, so what happened between, you know, Mama and, you know, your dad? Like, what happened? And she said that something happened before they ever got married, and my grandfather had to get a plate in his head, and from that moment he was constantly accusing and causing my grandma like hell. Like, they had kids together after they got married, but supposedly they got in a car accident. And whenever they got in a car accident, that's when he had to get a plate in his head, and then it caused him to like act erratic, and he said that he couldn't control it. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He was so afraid of losing my grandmother because he couldn't act right. He was constantly accusing her of bullshit, until to the point to where my grandma finally gave up and didn't want nothing to do with him. And so what ended up happening was, my mom said that my grandfather ended up moving out of state, or not out of state, but out of the city. And he never married again because he loved my grandmother so much. He had just like lived in a state of like depression. He never, you know, found anybody remotely close to what my grandma ended up remarrying a couple times. So, you know, it started to make sense to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm living grandparents' karma. Like, what they experienced in life has passed on through the year. Like, it skipped my mother's generation and has went straight to me, because like the similarities of just like their relationship kind of like matched up with the similarities of my life a little bit. And so I was like, all this time, like, my grandfather, then it occurred to me that all these handprints were my grandfather, that he has been in the area, in my realm, whenever things get bad, as a way to try to reach out, to calm me down, to stop it, to fix the situation. And I think that more than anything, he was trying to tell me to fix it, fix the situation, fix it. You see me, fix it, because he never got that opportunity to fix it and go and get the person that he loved. And by me saying that, it's like, so now I feel like more in tune with my grandfather's father side. It's almost like I feel my grandmother, but I can hear my grandfather, and it's crazy. So, yeah. So that was just that is like currently, that actually just happened. Nobody believed in me. And it's like, here I am, this person who is pushing out this faith and this belief in everybody around me, but nobody was doing it for me. Here I am, the one that people would come to pray for them, to get them, you know, up back in their successes and trying to better their lives. But if I went to somebody, nobody would do that same for me. And it got really hard, because no matter the circumstances that I went through, I knew a part of me would never give up. And that was something that was taken advantage of. I felt so confused about what I was experiencing, why was all this happening. Meeting that woman that I worked with catapulted my belief system. And then whenever it came to me starting to recognize the different type of ways my body was functioning and feeling around certain people, that inspired me to look further into what it was I was experiencing. Whenever I started to learn that I was an empath and I was sensitive to people's energies, then I started to look further into it, like what more is there outside of, you know, just God and the Bible and church. And like I started to really explore that more. That because of all of our belief systems, we all saw things in a different way of how to fix or come to a resolution. And when you get to a certain point in your life, if you're not striving to try to better yourself or to figure out why you act the way you act, or, you know, trying to come up with solutions in order to achieve those goals, then you stay at a standstill and you're not growing spiritually or energetically, or you're not growing. So I feel like in our weakest moments is whenever we start to figure stuff out about ourselves and we have the choice. When we are spiritually enlightened, meaning we are aware of our bullshit or we're aware of negative situations around. When we figure out, you know, why people are in our lives, whether it be for a season or for a lifetime, and then we start to, you know, it's like almost like we start to draw out a new blueprint for ourselves. And when we do that, then we start to see the signs and the synchronicities and, you know, the things that we didn't see before. Like, you start to get the bigger picture of things, and you may not know it all at that point, but you'll continue learning. You are never completely woke until you have experienced this lifetime. And I am a big believer in reincarnation. I feel like that when we are, you know, when we pass away, that we are recreating a whole new life. And whether that be in, you know, this existing lifetime, or whether it be a whole different generation, who are we to say? But that'll definitely be another video.
Something was calling me to like sit out with nature. Like, I'm completely barefooted. I went ahead and just took off my sandals before I even walked over here, because it seems like every time I come here the ground's always wet or muddy, and I just didn't want to like get my sandals all dirty. And I mean, come on now, it's been forever since I put my feet in some dirt, and it feels so good. I feel like I'm in tune with nature and listening to the birds chirp and looking at how massive these clouds are. Like, look at that. And then to look over there, it's like completely different. The sky's a whole different shade of blue. But to see these trees and all these flowers and memorial of lost loved ones. I can see why it's hard to accept that this is just part of life. But on the flip side, you can always look at it like we are one with the earth. We came from a seed, and we are planted in the ground as a seed would be. Whenever you want something to bloom, it's like to sit here and think of probably about, I'd say about 90% of these deceased loved ones have family that have multiplied throughout the years. And then you see these trees that are surrounded by all of these gravestones that have been here for hundreds of years, I bet. Maybe not that long, but I guarantee a few of them have definitely been here for a long period of time. And the roots that have been set in this ground and how beautiful it all is. Like, I understand death is a really hard thing to accept sometimes.
Yes, I met another person that I went to school with who had a spiritual gift. And like I said, I hadn't met too many people that was like that. So whenever I came across somebody else who was telling me that they had a spiritual, you know, awakening that caused them to see deceased loved ones, or just see deceased people in general, and they seen auras around people, and they tried to like enlighten me about certain, hold on, Lula, stop touching garbage. I wanted to know, you know, more about the ethereal world, and I wanted to know more about spirituality and other people that had gifts. So I started, I don't even know how I even came across it. I feel like I was reading something one day on Google, like laying in my bed crying all of my feelings, and like I came across like something about tarot cards or tarot readings. So like I started watching, and then like I found a couple of YouTubers that I really like, really felt like were genuine and like actually had a spiritual gift and weren't just doing it for the hell of it. So I began watching them and listening to their readings, and like it intrigued me to see, you know, spirit coming through messages in cards. And I loved it. Like I ended up like creating like this interest for tarot readings, which I stopped reading horoscopes and I started watching people read tarot. Now, I think I came across some that like just were, you know, I don't know, a bit dark, and I didn't quite get into. There were a couple that I actually was able to relate to and I could resonate with, and so therefore like a, you know, that part of me who was ever in doubt about or not interested in this stuff, like I became a believer that, you know, if you're in tuned enough or you're spiritually inclined, that, you know, like everybody has a gift in some shape or form. You know, there are several, and there is just a community of different categories of people who are gifted in certain ways. And like I said, I had met one that could see spirits. I had met one that, you know, could read auras. I met, you know, a lot of tarot readers are people who hear spirit and, you know, read signs and messages and stuff. So I thought it was pretty cool. And, it made me curious to like know more. Like I said, every time, like I feel like every time I was guided, just it was like random guidance to go here, look into this, look into that. So, you know, once I was guided to that, then I started to be more curious about like how I prayed and who I prayed to. And then I started really, then once I started making those videos, then I really started to get inspiring myself. Like I was inspiring myself to do more, to be more, to love myself more, to show myself more, you know, gratitude for the things that I've been through and the things I'm doing. Like it was a process. Trust me, I still have days to where I'm just like, am I even doing this good enough? But once I started getting used to the thought of that afterlife exists, the spirit world exists, God exists, after I knew all of these things that made me a believer, I started learning myself in a way that could help others. And I admit, you know, I was in denial for a really long time on whether or not to even share this information, because I didn't know how people would look at me. I didn't know if people would think I was crazy. I didn't know if people thought that, you know, I'm cursed, or I'm a witch, or that, you know, I'm stupid, or, you know, I'm living in a fantasy world. I didn't want to even tell people about this ability that I have, because I didn't want anybody to look at me differently. I grew up always wanting people to approve of me, and then I got to a point to where I didn't give a fuck what people thought about me, but a part of me still did, you know. but I've always remained this compassionate, loving person who just wanted good for everybody. Like, I've always wanted good. Like, if there's anything I can, like, applaud myself for, is that no matter how hard it's gotten in my life, I've never gotten to the point to where, like, I've wanted to hurt somebody in a really ill way or hurt myself in an ill way. It's just the thoughts never crossed my mind. Like, I've had negative thoughts before about, like, shit happening. I wasn't in that place in my life to be comfortable enough to say that, because like I said, it's really hard to tell people, but here I am telling people, you know. So I started to understand and realize that I needed to distance myself. I needed to break away from my family in order to find myself and find what really makes me feel like I'm being me. And by doing so, I have felt a lot of, besides from my body cleansing and detoxing itself, I have felt a lot of, like, I don't feel the animosity no more. I feel like I'm able to make decisions in my life now and not really give a shit what anybody says or thinks. I feel like I'm allowed to, I have the confidence to be able to stand firm in what it is that I want. And, you know, I feel like the journey is only beginning just because it took me so long to get to this point. But I do feel like that it's been these specific occurrences that have been like my spiritual awakenings, and I'll continue to have them, you know, until like I get to that point to where like I'm going into the afterlife. But I feel like, again, like we all are here for a purpose, and that's what my purpose was for me to find out where my gift comes from and why it's because mom also mentions that my grandmother had a gift that she don't speak about, so I don't really know much about that. I'll have to look into that further, but it's possible that my grandmother passed on her spirituality to me, and then I just picked up my grandfather's karma, possibly. I feel like my grandfather is constantly reaching out to me for me to fix stuff, but also to protect me and my children. So yeah, but that's just hearsay. That's what I'm at right now, and I just thought that I would go ahead and make this video to let you all know why I believe in spirituality, why I believe it exists for every one of us, and why it's a challenge, and it was a long road getting here, and I can't be more grateful than what I already am to know this about myself. Like, it's scary telling people about it. I know that you know, I'm going to probably get a lot of heat for it. I'm going to get a lot of opinions and stuff, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, go ahead and do your boots, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to think, whatever you believe, whatever you say. That's, I am whatever I say I am. And if I wasn't, then why would I say I am? In the paper, the news, every day I am. I don't know, it's just the way I am. Until the next episode. I remember right after my miscarriage, literally a year before I had gotten pregnant with Phoenix, I felt so alone. I didn't know who to turn to. Me and my relationship was just going downhill. I came here and I asked you to watch over my baby in heaven that never even got a chance. And I saw two little white butterflies playing with one another. I think that maybe it's possible that I would have had twins, but then sometimes I'd like to think that was just Mama and the baby playing. Every so often I see that white butterfly along my path, and I think of my baby